Hello, everyone. Hi, I am the engineer and producer of today's show. I am Jayme CheeseSlice, and I'm turning off the music. I didn't think it was going to repeat. Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Jayme CheeseSlice. Today we are doing Left on Left. We have our guest Gary Null, and we have a new format. We are now recording an 1 hour block for the radio, and our host today is going to be Gloria Guillo with resident expert Jayme Kuzmarov. Hello, you guys. And let's also bring in our guest, Gary Null. There we go. So, Gloria, it's your show. Take it away. Let's get this thing started. We got a whole hour to do, so let's do it.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Left on Left, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep from crying. I'm Gloria Guillo, a former administrator in New York City government, an investigative journalist, vice chair at WBAI Radio, and a co-founder of Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, a group so left, it's right on. I'm joined here today by our resident expert, Jayme Kuzmarov. Jayme is a professor at Tulsa Community College, a historian, investigative journalist, and managing editor of Covert Action Magazine, an online magazine that focuses on CIA and deep state activity. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. Disclaimer. This content is intended for information and education purposes and should only be interpreted and should not be interpreted as professional advice. Viewers are encouraged to conduct their own research and form their own opinions. Our topic for today is on the hearings with Tulsi and RFK Jr. And today, LOL is joined by Gary Null. This is our first 1 hour episode for WBAI and the Progressive Radio Network. Gary is considered by many their health guru, and by the authentic left, an insightful and medical geopolitical researcher and truth teller. Gary is always way ahead of the curve. We have caught up with him today to discuss President Trump's appointment of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, who are on track to take up their posts in the cabinet after winning Republican support on February 4th and clearing their respective Senate confirmation committees. They won by a slim margin along partisan lines, 14-13 for Kennedy and 9-8 for Gabbard. The full Senate vote is unscheduled, but usually it happens in 1 to 2 weeks. Latest is February 18th. The U.S. Senate has 100 senators with 2 from every state. A simple majority, 51 votes, is typically required to confirm a nominee, unless a filibuster requires a 60-vote threshold to overcome. Given its 53-47 Republican majority, there does not appear to be enough votes to block either confirmation. Kennedy overcame reservations about his suitability to be the health secretary over what his detractors considered vaccine skepticism, although most of what he has reported has now been confirmed through studies, leaks, and FOIL requests. When confirmed, Kennedy will run the Department of Health and Human Services, CDC, NIH, FDA, and Medicare and Medicaid, and others, overseeing more than $2 trillion in healthcare spending, which provides health insurance for more than 140 Americans. Gabbard earned support to become Director of National Intelligence, which is a $76.5 billion budget that we know of. I mean, there's other ways that they get their money, and, but this is what's kind of on the books. Despite alarming some Republican senators by refusing to join them in condemning Edward Snowden as a traitor for leaking secret documents, the fact that Edward Snowden revealed that the U.S. government, through its National Security Agency, the NSA, was spying on American citizens without the legally required warrants, remained lost on them. To many on both the left and the right, Snowden is a brave whistleblower and hero. What was exposed in the committee hearings through the vitriol from key Democratic senators Sanders, Warren, Wyden, is their allegiance to the healthcare industry that makes them appear as its shills, especially when OpenSecrets.com lists their donations. Is this payola? Take it away, Gary and Jeremy. Thank you.
Great. Well, Gary, yeah, I think we'd be interested in hearing your perspective. Well, first on the hearings with Robert Kennedy, what was your impression of those hearings and these attacks from some of the Democratic Party congressmen and senators?
A good question. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. BAI has been a home for 48 years until this past year. So long time, long relationship. Also with KPFK in Los Angeles, a Pacific affiliate, and PFW in Washington, and KPFT in Texas, not with their station in, I've had no association with their station in Berkeley. But they have been at the forefront of being a platform for being, as the founder of Pacifica said, a voice for the voiceless. Why is that important today? Because frequently you'll know who you should be concerned with who you cannot criticize. And we have been told that you cannot criticize any of the former CDC, FDA, US Public Health Service, USDA, National Institute of Aging, etc., National Cancer Institute. You can't criticize them because they are the authorities. Why? Because almost 100 years ago, it was decided also through the Supreme Court that the final arbiter on all things is the scientific community. Therefore, we must trust them. And indeed, Americans have trusted. Many of us believe that that trust has been misplaced. It's certainly understandable when someone makes a mistake. And in fact, it's inevitable. But hopefully the mistakes are made in the early research, either basic research or applied research. Then you see, okay, we have too high a dose of this, like with AZT. Today, any physician in the United States or pharmacist giving out a prescription for 1,600 milligrams of AZT would lose their license. And yet that was the amount that Anthony Fauci, the same Anthony Fauci, who controlled everything on COVID, he's the man who said, if you criticize me, you're criticizing science. Well, we have millions of scientists in the United States. Does he speak for all of them? No. But a lot of them, yes, especially through prestigious universities that he is endowed with hundreds of billions of dollars collectively over the decades, his 40 years. He gained power in 1984. Now, why am I connecting Anthony Fauci then with a Robert Kennedy hearing today? Because at that time, we thought that the person who was running the war on AIDS was a person who had not a stellar background. He worked at the National Cancer Institute and dutifully trying to find a cause of cancer that was a virus, HTLV 1, 2, and 3, but that wasn't the case. On loan from the Pasteur Institute, because they had not found the cause of AIDS in their LAV virus. So they loaned it to Dr. Popovic, who ran the center in looking for virus cancer connections at the National Cancer Institute, where Fauci was fully aware of what they were doing. And Robert Gallo was the chief person. He was the face, but the power behind all of AIDS was Anthony Fauci. Gallo didn't give the money out. Fauci did. And he gave a lot of it. To date, we estimate over $800 billion has been given. Well, he promoted AZT. He did not promote Bactrim, which was commonly used within the community suffering from pneumocystis, Korean pneumonia. That was very effective. But AZT, not only was it not effective, according to the Concord study and dozens of other studies, but it led to what we estimate were 300,000 unnecessary deaths. And so we were told by Fauci, if you tested positive, you had the disease. And in a relatively short period of time, you would go through symptoms of breakdown in the immune system, and you would have possibly any one of 30 different conditions. That was not true. But he wasn't questioned then, and he had an incredible largesse with scientists all over the world. So when you keep getting money and the amounts that he was giving, which is our money, with no accountability, and then he can say, with plausible deniability, we're doing all we can to find a cure or even a prevention for AIDS. Okay, why not look at some alternative approaches? There are a lot of scientists who say there's other ways of approaching AIDS. He said no. In fact, to even suggest an alternative approach as a distinguished Nobel laureate, no. Linus Pauling believed that we could approach these diseases with high-dose vitamin C and other ways of changing our lifestyle. No. Dr. Curry Mullis, who I know personally, in fact, I have an hour and 53-minute film of him that I filmed at his home. He said Anthony Fauci is an idiot. His words. I tried to debate him, and the president of the University of South Carolina was arranging a debate. He wouldn't come to that debate. In fact, nobody will debate me. That's what the Nobel Prize winner who discovered the PCR test, polymerase chain reaction test. And he said, don't use this test. Don't use my test that I invented and got the Nobel Prize for. Do not use this to determine that you have a specific disease. It is only amplifying the matter that you're examining to a larger piece, but at certain amplifications is garbage. Now, why is that important? This comes back in a moment, again, to Robert, where we have to look at the backstory. And unfortunately, all of the media, left and right, is focusing only on point, counterpoint. They're not taking the time, as you as a journalist have done, to look at the deeper story. That's one of the reasons I promote and respect the work you've done with a lot of obstacles in your way on your magazine, Covert Action Quarterly. So what happened was we ended up with a test that was not a gold standard. A gold standard test, like the HIV antibody test, should be looking for an antibody reaction, but only from one source. And then we found out from a woman named Johnson, Christine Johnson, that there were at least 80 different conditions that could test you positive for an antibody test, even though you had no HIV in your body. If you were pregnant, if you had leprosy, tuberculosis, malaria, common in Africa, hence a lot of positive tests there. if your T cells went below 200. But we don't even know what happens to those the T cells. We can't tell you whether it's bad or good. As a marathon runner, as a vegan, and having helped over 32,000 individuals join the Natural Living Running and Walking Club, and then we trained them to do the marathon, and they got really healthy. But the day after the marathon, when we tested ourselves versus the day before a marathon with our blood workup, we all had less than 200 T cells, but we were outstandingly healthy, no diseases. So there was a lot of misinterpretation of the available scientists. So then over 3,000 scientists said that we have questions. We're not saying it's not real, it is real. All 30 conditions are real. And we're not saying HIV virus doesn't exist, but we're saying that there has to be more to it. There has to be cofactors. No, said Fauci. No, said Gallo. And then they controlled it. You got zero funding, you were criticized, and then all these separate groups that were funded would come in and attack you. They'd try to do what we're doing now, cancel people, gaslight people, destroy their reputations, and they did. And brave individuals, courageous individuals who had something constructive to add to a dialogue, a civil dialogue, which is what science should be. When science becomes orthodox, it ceases to be science. It becomes a collective, almost a collective psychosis of people agreeing to agree on something, so they create a consensus, but no one is the 10th person. If you're not familiar with the 10th person, and I was taught this when I was a junior scientist in my 20s at the Institute of Applied Biology, a very respected research institute, much like the Pasteur Institute. Great minds were there. I was not one of those great minds, but there were great minds who had been at the Institute of Pasteur and other Koch Institute in Germany. But I was working on health and nutrition. They were working on cures for cancer, et cetera. And when I did a paper that I thought was really good, that would help society on intermittent fasting, meaning if you fasted from your dinner until breakfast, that 12-hour, 15-hour period, that would do more to reverse your aging process and stimulate your immune recycling than anything else you could do. And so the director of the Institute, we were sitting 16 department heads, and I headed the health and nutrition on anti-aging. They said, now deconstruct your argument. Tell us why you're wrong. Prove yourself wrong. I thought, okay, how do I do that? Well, first get other people who you're not friends with, who are scientists, to duplicate your work, which, by the way, would take another year, and it took another year. And finally, I had 4 other people who confirmed the accuracy of my work. He said, now, you've had independent confirmation. Did they come up with the same results? I said, exact. He said, then we can consider it legitimate. And that means is if you have 10 people all coming up with the same identical conclusions, one of them has to be the outlier. You must select one person who has the integrity, the honesty, the knowledge, the wherewithal to see where you made a mistake. And that's good science, because then if everyone agrees that something is good and one person says, hold on, it's not, here's what you didn't look at, then that outlier can correct what ended up in the public domain. Now think of asbestos, DDT, copper coil 7, intrauterine devices, radiation of our food, the safety of mercury, the safety of let's say, aluminum adjuvant in vaccines, the safety of the synthetic hormone replacement therapy, which was a consensus. It's safe. Give it to every woman who needs it. I debated the Surgeon General of the United States on PBS National. I didn't know what I was going to talk about because I got a call. The person who was going to debate her was delayed, couldn't make it. And so a person at the station called me and said, can you come down and debate this person? I said, sure. Don't you want to know what it's about? No. I'm either going to know it or I'm not. And the audience will tell. And it turned out to be Surgeon General. And the first question was about the importance of the importance of hormone replacement therapy. And this Surgeon General said, yes, it's very important. It turns off hot flashes. True. And it helps a woman keep from losing bone density as she gets older and get osteoporosis. Also true, accurate on both points. So when it came to me, I said, I appreciate the good work that this Surgeon General is doing, especially for women's health. Had she had a little more time, she would explain that natural hormone replacement therapy, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, does that. But here's what else it does. It prevents stroke, heart attacks, heart disease, cancer, colorectal cancer, and dementia that occur in 1,300,000 women each year, many times fatal, of the 10 million women taking hormone replacement therapy. They should take the natural hormone replacement and be careful, because all those conditions just came from synthetic hormone replacement therapy, which the medical committee has agreed is safe and effective, which it is neither. And the Surgeon General looked at me like, But instead of making her look bad, which I do not like to make anyone look bad, I don't believe that debating should be a blood sport. I believe there should be a civil dialogue where people who have an interest share their ideas and see which ideas has the science to back it up. Now, Gallo didn't have the science and Fauci didn't have the science. And yet they controlled everything. They controlled the media. They controlled all the educational institutions. They controlled the public. They terrified people. Sound familiar? Let's go forward 40 years and then back off to 2006. What happened in 2006? Again, this is very important. Responding to Robert, a group of 27 of the world's leading scientists and physicians, people who had outstanding reputations, they wrote a letter to Science magazine. Why Science? Because Science magazine was the publication in 1984 that published 4 articles on the same day. But the lead article by Dr. Popovic and Dr. Gallo stated that the virus, which came from the Pasteur Institute, the LAV virus, they didn't mention that. Instead, they used Gallo's virus, which was not used at all. And that this was the probable cause of AIDS. Probable. And that got published. But all the science showed that that was a lie. It was wrong. In fact, what we found out was when Gallo went to Europe to sell his antibody test, right, the test that if you test positive, you're going to get AIDS and die, that in point of fact, Popovic did all the studies. And he came to the conclusion in his paper to Science magazine that there was no pathological cause to this virus. And he used the LAV virus, meaning he acknowledged it was Pasteur Institute's virus. They couldn't find pathology, so maybe he could. So after all this tests, he said, I've done all the tests. This is not the cause of AIDS. Then he sent it over for additional confirmation from the director of the National Cancer Institute's electron microscopic division, and he came back saying this is too small to be a retrovirus, and there's mainly cellular debris. Again, there's nothing here. In fact, in Popovic's article, the entire foundation of all of AIDS rests on this single article. Everything else came from this. Well, you know, if you start off with a lie as your truth, and everyone believes your lie, thinking it's the truth, then everything coming from that is going to be compounding the lie. And that's exactly what happened to the entire war on AIDS. As a result, when he got it all ready to submit, in fact, in his article, in the last paragraph of his manuscript, which I have a copy of, he says it's extremely difficult to activate this virus unless you have some medium, meaning you have to cause the virus to be active. Otherwise, it's not active. You're not going to get anyone sick. That's his words from his research. Gallo comes home over the weekend, reads this, and goes crazy like. He starts scribbling through it. No scientist does this. It's totally unethical. And he changes everything. and he takes out the LAV source of the virus, and he puts in his virus. Well, what do you call that? Anyhow, and then he submits it, and they publish that. And everything else came from misinformation and fraud. Later, when one of the greatest journalists in the world, Janine Roberts, out of Great Britain, she's the one who gave us the whole insight on blood diamonds and dozens of other stories over a long, distinguished career. She called me and she said, Gary, I've got something that's very important. I said, what's that? She said, I have the original Popovic article. I have Gallo's changing it, and then they both signed the corrected one. I said, why would Popovic sign an article that completely changed his results? That makes no sense. She said, I don't know. So she brought it over. I held a press conference on the air at my 92nd Street studio. And it was never picked up by any media. When I say no media, I mean no media picked it up. But that's what we read out. We went through this. Now, evidently, some scientists who did care about the truth were listening. And over a period of years, they got together and they said, we've got to address this. Too many people are dying who shouldn't be. The treatments are not the right treatments. And their diagnostic test is a fraud. There was a Perth group, there was outstanding scientists who agreed that we got it wrong. So that's the letter they wrote. By that time, this information had been circulated to the federal government. The National Academy of Sciences, our most august body of scientists, they had the Institute of Medicine and all the other investigative bodies of our government investigate these claims. And they found they were accurate. They found the truth, and they excoriated Gallo. And I quoted, and the letter quoted all these mishappenings.
Gary, can you bring this into today and the...
I am.
Okay.
You'll see where
Great. Thank you.
So anyhow, he was totally excoriated, but he was not charged. Why? Because guess who? The head of Health and Human Services decided not to bring charges against him. What role was Robert Kennedy going to? Health and Human Services head, the same position. And so he gave Gallo a green light. All right, so Gallo was never charged and brought into court. But I've got the Dingle report, I got the National Institute's report, I have it all. And in the letter, they cited every one of these official government citations of their conclusions. Nothing happened to Gallo. The people didn't know about this. It was hidden. And then just this year, I wrote another letter to Science Magazine, sending them that copy, but I had almost 3,000 scientists backing up my report. Now, what have we learned from this? We learned that the entire AIDS program was handled by Fauci. False statements made nonstop, toxic drugs given that killed a lot of people. But we don't want to know about that. The government, the industry, the media, that's behind us. Quote, lessons learned. So what does Robert Kennedy do 3 years ago? He starts researching, and he brings in top researchers like Celia Farber, who I'm sure you have heard of or read her work. No. Celia and about a dozen others to go to work, and they find all the things that, once again, Anthony Fauci has done that are wrong. Lies, lying before Congress. But then they go into his background. Now, I've known Robert a long time. And Robert has never been anti-vaccine. To the contrary, he has always stated, I'm pro-vaccine. My children have had all their vaccinations. I've had all my vaccinations. And I've told Robert, you're not doing your homework. It's one thing to emphasize the importance of a safe and effective vaccine, but how do you know they're safe and effective? You're taking the consensus. You're taking 10 out of 10 scientists in some position of power saying, oh yeah, they're safe and effective. So I began a campaign, and I wrote to date 72 articles completely deconstructing the myth of safety and efficacy or the amount of vaccines a person has to take. At the same time, I show all the different studies, thousands of studies in the toxicology. For example, you cannot find a safe vaccine because even the Supreme Court and all of Congress agreed years ago that vaccines are, quote, inherently unsafe. I'll give you an example. Why do children who are just born have to get a hepatitis B vaccine? There's no science supporting that.
It's one of the ones that just freaks me out too.
In fact, that was based on a study in Asia where it showed that women who had hepatitis might transmit that into their baby. So all you have to do is take a hepatitis test to the mother during pregnancy. And if she doesn't have hepatitis, there's no reason in the world to give it to her. But then look at the side effects. All these vaccines have things that are terribly toxic, like formaldehyde, polysorbate 80, silver, and also aluminum, very toxic. And then you start seeing a graph from the day that the government under the Reagan administration said, okay, you're not doing enough vaccines. And they said, well, we can't do a lot of vaccines because we're held liable. And a lot of vaccines are toxic and dangerous and kill people, and we'll go broke. He says, okay, then we're going to write a law and protect you. Interesting enough, the person who sponsored that law in Congress, in the House of Representatives, the moment that law was passed, shortly thereafter went to work at $1 million plus contract representing the pharmaceutical industry. In any case, I said, so Robert, when you give your kid a vaccine, what's the placebo? He said, well, an inert substance. So in other words, if you gave a vaccine, the placebo should be a saline solution, just salt water. Yeah, inert, right. What if I told you they were using other vaccines that have been proven toxic as their placebo? So then you're gaming the system. You know that that vaccine is no good, is toxic. So now you've got a toxic vaccine up here competing with your vaccine. Your results are going to come out, oh yeah, we did better than the placebo. Why don't you take 100,000 children who've never been vaccinated and whose parents have never been vaccinated and compare them with the outcomes of 100,000 children who had all their vaccines by schedule and their parents as well? Well, they didn't think of that, but someone actually did. And there's a new study showing, the only one of its kind in the world, that 100,000 unvaccinated children had remarkable health. They even factored in that you'd have to go back to the mid-1950s before these high schedules where you got 1 or 2 vaccines to show how healthy kids were, where you didn't have inner ear infections and you didn't have autoimmune conditions and you didn't have learning disabilities if you went full term. In fact, you were healthy. And now you compare them to children today, we've never had as many sick children born sick and getting sicker. And we didn't have autism back then. And it wasn't because we couldn't diagnose it. It wasn't a primary factor. Now it is. So when you go from 1 in 10,000 having autism and other neurological spectrum disorders to 1 in 33, 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 33, then someone should break ranks and say, maybe we should do an independent study, because who does the studies? The pharmaceutical companies. And how do they get that through? We had just found out, and Robert knows this, and Robert's talking about this, but they won't let him talk, that a couple of weeks ago we found out through a Freedom of Information Act that the pharmaceutical companies have been paying millions upon millions of dollars collectively to peer reviewers. Now, a peer reviewer is a person that gets an article and they review it and see, has it made mistakes? Is it accurate? And if it is, then they sign off and it goes to a journal. You're giving someone a lot of money. How objective can fair-minded and honest can they be? They can't. As a result, they corrupted the system. But then we have people who are very famous, whose names appear on articles. And that means like, oh, we know who he is, let him in. We'll publish this article. They were paid. They had ghostwriters write the actual articles. And people were paid lots of money to have their names put on them. To me, that's completely unethical. I published over 973 articles including in some of the most prestigious journals in the United States. I have a PhD in human nutrition, public health science, senior research fellow, etc., and I've had a lot of clinical studies. So as a scientist, separate the journalist. I look for the truth in something, because if you find the truth, you better be aware that other people might take offense to the fact that you found something that could make them look bad or cost them money. As a result, the CDC, and Robert brought this out in his book, which sold over 1 million copies, and nobody in the mainstream media reviewed it with any integrity. They trashed it, but it was all based upon solid evidence. So he already had been designated as an enemy before this even came up. In fact, even before he decided to run for president. So now, go to the conclusion, you have one of the most qualified people in America to be the head of Health and Human Services. Why is he qualified? Because he's not a medical doctor, and he's not a PhD, and he's not a scientist. He happens to be one of the most honest litigators with a phenomenal track record of finding corruption in corporate America that was always defended by corporations. And if I were able to testify, I would ask the very committee hearing people who attacked him without letting him talk, in all the time that you've been in Congress, how many people who are whistleblowers who came before this committee and told you the truth did you listen to or do anything with? And how many people at the National Cancer Institute and FDA, the CDC, and any other health agency, how many of those people running those committees found corruption or malfeasance in their own science, in their own programs? Not one. So over the last 100 years, outside of Wiley, who was the first commissioner of the FDA and quit because it was so corrupt, how many people who you've given this power to oversee our health have actually overseen our health? Where were they for 90 years when not a single case could be won against the tobacco industry, 7 leading corporations, because they couldn't prove that smoking led to lung cancer, emphysema, and heart disease? Until a whistleblower, not in the government, not a head of an agency, not a member of Congress, but rather a person working for one of the big 7, his conscience was so struck because he found out that they knew that it would cause addiction. Why? Because the FDA for all those decades was hiding in its files the truth that their patents showed it could cause addiction. So here's the government working against the people. In that period of time, anywhere from 7 to 11 million Americans died of smoking-related disease, cancers, and heart attacks, etc. Yet here's the FDA, one of the agencies the Health and Human Services oversaw, never once criticizing it. People going from the FDA into industries they were supposed to protect, like Judy Gerberding at the CDC. She handled the vaccines safety at the CDC, and the moment she left, she went to work over at, I think it was Merck, for what was, I think, over a $3 million deal that she cashed out on. Well, since when do we have to have someone who's going to do this revolving door? Robert Kennedy called that out. Robert Kennedy was in Washington, D.C., calling out that we finally had the proof of what was causing brain disorders and Alzheimer's or autism. In Washington, D.C., I filmed Robert, and also there were a couple of celebrities, and they were all marching. Why? Because Robert Kennedy was the only lawyer I'm aware of who was given a copy of the Vera Stratton papers. Now, why is Vera Stratton important? Because Robert was an attorney. He was going after corporations. He was cleaning up the environment. He did more to clean up the Hudson River than any other person in American history. And Robert, through a Freedom of Information Act, got the minutes that were taken that were not supposed to be taken from a conference. The conference was so secret, it wasn't held at the CDC. It was held at a Christian conference center nearby. Who was at that center? The heads of all major vaccine makers, the World Health Organization representative, people who, if there was something negative, had to know. So in secret, and they were told you can't use your cell phones, you can't photograph anything, don't take notes, but one person did. And that's how those documents got into Robert. What they find, that this was hundreds of thousands of kids, and they found out that African-American young males had a 324% increase in autism spectrum disorder if they used the MMR vaccine. And so everybody at that conference talk about, well, let's redo the figures. Let's redo it. We can't allow this to come out. What parent would want their kid to get vaccinated, especially African-American parents, if they knew that their kid had such a high possibility of having permanent brain damage, neurological development? So Robert took that information and he broadcast it. Well, guess what happened? Nothing. When he tried to get hearings, what happened? Nothing, because the House Speaker and the Senate Speaker would not allow that information to go forward. And that was Robert who caused that. And so then the media came out and attacked him. At the same time that was happening, there was a person over at the CDC, a respected scientist, and he said in a phone call, of all things, what a coincidence. Nobody from the government in a position of authority ever returns a call. But Dr. Brian Hooker, whose son developed autism after the vaccines, he was trying to find out information. He wanted to know, was there something in the vaccines that could have caused the autism? He was getting nowhere until someone picked up the phone that day, and his name was William Thompson. And William Thompson started a conversation. He was very empathetic, and they had a couple conversations. And then in an early conversation, he said this. He said, we knew it would cause this. So we were told, bring big black garbage bags to the office, and all of our records on that study were to be destroyed. Well, that's obstruction of justice. And that takes away all their indemnification. You do the wrong thing, you commit a crime, you're no longer covered. And no one knew it. But everyone was involved, including people that I had filmed who lied under oath in Congress and under Dingell's committee. And as a result, I picked up all the lies. Do you know any association between vaccines and ill health? And they said, no, we don't. That was a lie. They knew. They covered it up. But he was afraid. He was afraid because he thought, what if I'm subpoenaed or I get a Freedom of Information Act and I've destroyed the documents? So he kept one copy. So then Brian, when he heard that there was a conspiracy, the government knew, the CDC knew, that meant that everyone else knew that there was a definite link between autism and vaccines. He started recording the calls. I have all those recordings. I've played on the program. So now you would think that surely now Congress would be forced to do a hearing to bring these people in under oath. No. One legislator from Florida got thousands of these documents from Dr. Thompson, and Thompson became a whistleblower. But then they gave him a big raise, and then he doesn't talk with anyone since. And as a result, he took it to Congress and he said, let's open a hearing. No. So I started looking at all the people that said no. They all got huge amounts of money from Big Pharma. Huge. And there's 3 lobbyists for every member of Congress, just from the pharmaceutical industry. So now let's bring it full circle. So Robert Kennedy back then was seeking the truth. He did not condemn all vaccines, but he sure as the Dickens had a good reason to challenge the MMR vaccine, and he had all the compelling evidence. So it wasn't a matter of, does it cause a problem? Their own study, the most definitive study with hundreds of thousands of kids, they proved, the government proved, the CDC proved, this vaccine causes a 324% increase in autism spectrum disorders and other neurologically condition in a child's brain. They hid it. Then they destroyed the evidence, and now they won't allow a hearing. Chuck Schumer wouldn't allow a hearing. Nancy Pelosi wouldn't allow a hearing. Chavez, who I see as a consultant, he didn't allow a hearing. I got a list of all the people who blocked this, and I'm writing an article exposing all of them and exposing how much money they got. So now you start to realize, wow, if that was one vaccine that caused that much damage, how about all the other vaccines? So Robert didn't have the time to do that research. I did, and I put over 10,000 hours into it, and I've never had to have a single sentence in any article I've ever written retracted for lack of accuracy. So I've given Robert all that information. And when Robert was being challenged, they're smart. Before they challenged him before the Senate, they wanted to destroy his reputation. Like, he's just a predator. That's what his cousin, Caroline Kennedy, said. But she'd already said all this and attacked him along with other members of his family when he agreed to run for president. So now they're bringing him back. Why? If they made their statements in all the major media at the time, remember the New York Times back then, what's the point? Because that was supposed to be the death knell, because people forget. So now a year later, she's back, and then all these scurrilous attacks against him. But he already had acknowledged his human failings about his addictions and bad behavior in a book. He laid it all out. I haven't seen Bill Clinton write such a book.
Right.
Or Hillary Clinton, and what she did with the Clinton Foundation and USAID, how much money that gave, and how much Ukraine gave as the number one giver of money to the Clinton Foundation. No, all that has stayed secret. So they thought they could knock him off his game. So around the country, they always work the same way. They get highly respected journalists or broadcasters or public influencers to attack a person using the same words, identical words, word for word. And so I just listened to what they were doing, and I said, here's the next way they're going to attack him. They're going to attack him on this and this. So I would write articles. In the last 3 months, I wrote 23 articles, and I sent them over to Robert and Mary Holland at Children's Self-Defense. And then I said, if you feel these have value, use them, because I believe this is where they're going to attack you. So now you have all the scientific literature to show you were right and they're wrong. So then let's finalize it. So now Robert Kennedy goes to Washington, much like Mr. Smith went to Washington. And now he's attacked. His character is attacked. His lack of experience is attacked. And I say the best thing Robert Kennedy could have on his side is not having the experience, because all hundreds and hundreds of the best and brightest from Harvard and Yale who ran these different agencies, look what they did. How about nothing except rubber stamping every single drug and vaccine that came down the pipe? And how many of those FDA approved drugs turned out to be bad and had to be relabeled, black box, or banned? Over 50% in one 10-year period. 50%. So Robert can now bring in truly independent physicians and scientists who will then see what's wrong with the process. Well, how about taking all the money out of the process? Meaning the CDC owns patents. They share in royalties. They are in the business of marketing and promoting the safety and efficacy of very toxic vaccines. Take all the money away. All right? Take all the money away from the FDA, because the FDA doesn't do its own research, does no research. The very companies pay the FDA, and the FDA, again, stamps. And think of all those boards. Well, we have 10 members to this board to see the efficacy of this vaccine, and we all approve it, it's safe. Now get rid of all those people. Get rid of the inspector generals who are complicit. Remember Durham? Look at all the stuff that you could have on him and all the other inspector generals. Get new inspector generals in who have no association with this industry, and get scientists. We have thousands of outstanding scientists, and then have them run all of these agencies. Now you have an MD, PhD, but you have an honest one and you have an independent one, and they're not taking money and haven't taken money from big industry or others that would influence them. Now you're really an administrator. They come, can we do this? Can we do that? Here's the studies, and they don't look good. Okay, let's not allow them through. And then do a study on the 100,000. I sent Robert that study. We have the proof that 100,000 children who were not vaccinated with any vaccine compared to 100,000 children who got the full schedule and their parents, this group, phenomenal health. You couldn't find a healthier kid. This group, the sickest group of children. And then you start seeing cause and effect. And then have people who are not just looking to promote their likes and careers, these influencers who I don't listen to, unless they have the skill and the knowledge and the background, clinical experience to show that they know what they're talking about. And there are a lot of good people who could be spokesperson. And then Robert wants to bring in prevention.
Wow.
There's no prevention right now. Robert wants to bring alternative therapies. So I wrote a series of articles challenging Wikipedia. How many? 77 articles I wrote, walk away from Wikipedia, because of how, in my opinion, is completely misguided, and it's run by a group called skeptics who are all affiliated with organizations that don't want anything but mainstream medicine, pharmaceuticals, etc., as therapy. But on the Library of Medicine, National Library of Medicine, and PubMed, that's the official repository of the best information, they have tens of thousands of studies on vitamin C. For example, in Wuhan, who survived first? The hospital in Wuhan. It's not the Wuhan Institute of Virology, it's a hospital. They were using 24,000 milligrams of vitamin C and knocking it out like that.
Wow.
Why didn't we do that? So I wrote 2 articles on natural approaches to building up your immune system against viruses. But people around the country were doing that. So who came in and says, no, Anthony Fauci, only what I say can you do. You can use a drug once you go into a hospital, remdesivir, a deadly drug that had a 54% fatality rate when it was used against the Ebola virus in Africa. And before then, stay at home. But what if you're healthy? Stay at home. What if I want to go outside, get some sunlight, some vitamin D, exercise? Stay at home. So there was a stand down order on all the medicine. So doctors are coming forward and say, well, hold on, this upper respiratory bacterial infection in the lungs, why should you not treat it? We have azithromycin, we have antibiotics that can cure that. Nope, don't do anything. So good doctors, by the hundreds of thousands, had to let their patients be sick until, quote, they were so sick they had to go to the hospital. Then they got intubated, wrong therapy. And then they got the drug remdesivir, wrong therapy. And there was escalating in death. Whereas those doctors who did the right thing, Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. McCullough, and others, Dr. Cole, they were saving their patients' life. In one clinic alone, 10,000 people who were COVID positive ended up getting these therapies and lived. There was only 4 deaths out of 10,000 patients, and those 4 all started therapies late. If you started on day 1 with the therapies they were recommending, and the studies were there to support them, but then they attacked, and by attacking that, they were attacking Robert. Oh, Robert's using horse dewormer, not even good for a human. No, he never talked about ivermectin from horses. He was talking about it at 6 milligrams or 12 milligrams, depending upon the stage of a person's disease, and hydroxychloroquine and zinc and vitamin C and quercetin, all of which have been proven by clinical experience and in the scientific literature have strong antiviral properties. And those people lived and thrived and got over their COVID early. Fauci attacked all of them. Organizations were set up, disinformation organizations. Fauci and the White House, working with Big Pharma, went to Google, went to Mark Zuckerberg, went to Facebook, went to all these different platforms and said, here's who you're going to allow to get on, and here's who you're going to cancel. And I want to see algorithms that don't allow anyone to go that story on a natural approach. None. So nowhere could you find a natural approach to COVID. Fauci was behind all that. Now if Robert takes office, Robert will be able to see all the unredacted communications to him and colleagues who ran Health and Human Services. He'll see the unredacted communications between him and the ECHO Alliance and Peter Daszak and Ralph Barrick over at the University of North Carolina, because now we know for a fact that there were 2 departments of virology. One was the one that was being funded. The other were 99 PhD virologists by the Chinese Communist government who were working on the virus as well. So when word got out that COVID vaccine was being developed before we were told there was a COVID virus, how do you do that? How do you have the supposed cure before you have the disease? That was just one of the discrepancies. And then anyone who wanted to whistleblow, and there were whistleblowers, they were all, like you mentioned earlier in the introduction, Snowden. Think of it this way. We have a law that protects whistleblowers from retaliation. Barack Obama put more whistleblowers in prison than all other presidents in the United States combined. Hillary Clinton wanted to see him executed, as did Pompeo and others. So, did I miss something here? a person who has the courage to see that there's a crime being committed by a state agency, Snowden and Julian Assange, and instead of being appreciated for the sacrifice they made, they're punished. So those who committed the crime are promoted, and those who exposed the crime are jailed. That, to me, is our government. If I were to moniker it with one insight, that would be it. So if how you do one thing in government is almost how you're going to do everything. So if you start off lying about successful treatments that cannot be patented and attacking the developers or promoters, you want to promote something that's known to be toxic, like AZT, or any of the therapies that they've done for COVID, you got the same person 40 years apart. So what in the world has changed in 40 years by those people who are considered the right experts to be here, not a person like Robert Kennedy? No, Robert is the only person in America that I would say has the confidence and the ability to go in there and fight and win. He's the one, along with another group, a law firm, who brought us the information on the Roundup. And because of that, a lot of people are not going to die from the cancers that would have evolved from that. So name the last person in any agency that was found guilty of crimes against humanity, at the CIA, at the FBI, Homeland Security, any agency. And now you see why I believe that the new crop of people, many of them did not vote for Trump directly. Most people I know think he's just a useful idiot and of no redeeming qualities. But if you're able to get him into a power where he empowers others who have some really progressive ideas and who have character and have integrity and have the facts, all right, they're not perfect. Tulsi Gabbard, and Robert Kennedy, I challenged him on his pro-Zionist position. But as much as I hold them responsible for misinformation on that, I also have to say, are they the people who have the courage to deconstruct a corrupt system? And the answer is yes. So where I don't like what they did here, it's not an all or none situation when it comes to the first radical change we can have in American government since 1974, when the Church Committee exposed the fact that the CIA had control over 1,400 news organizations, all the major ones, and controlled the narrative on everything and lied about everything, and never had to pay a price. To George Bush and Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld and Powell pay a price for saying weapons of mass destruction when there were none, and they knew there was none? No. How about in the Gulf War in 1980? How about before that with in Panama with Bush Sr.? How about Lyndon Johnson in the Gulf and Tonkin resolution? All lies. All we can say is lessons learned. Well, sorry, I don't know of any lessons we've ever learned. So I hope that coalesces to see why that. And then also, I have a chart of all the money each of the people attacking him have gained from being associated and promoting Big Pharma. And the most vicious of the attacks were the people who got the most money. We're talking about millions of dollars. So hope that answers your question.
And so who got the most money, if you remember?
I have a whole chart of it. There's like 27 individuals I checked on. And Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are right up there, by the way.
Bernie Sanders got 23 million and Elizabeth Warren 14.
And mind you, didn't Sanders say straight out to Elon Musk? Or no, who was he debating? He was arguing with someone. No, it was Robert Kennedy he was arguing with. He says, I don't accept money, something to that effect from pharma. Oh, yeah, a lot of money from pharma.
Yeah, well, he was claiming his donations came just from the workers of those industries and kind of rank and file and not from the executives, and that he wasn't in their pocket.
Yeah, but in government and in industry, they encourage people to do that. That's almost part of your job, is to,
but I
fund
mean,
certain
with Bernie
party.
Sanders, yeah, I mean, he was promoting like Medicare for all, and I guess he packages himself as taking on Big Pharma, but then he was among the most vitriolic in attacking Kennedy.
Okay, when was the last time Bernie Sanders challenged the National Defense Authorization Act, a completely draconian law promoted by Obama, which takes away all habeas corpus? You can be arrested on orders of the President of the United States without bail, without a hearing, without an attorney, without legal representation, kept indefinitely, and even killed. And it's not going to go against the president. Nobody would even know it. None. How about the Patriot Act? None. And they keep refunding it and reauthorizing it. How about holding those who lied on the FISA warrants repeatedly to get illegal wiretaps? Have they been brought forward? What happened to the FISA court? These are judges. Didn't these judges condemn this and turn this over to the same attorney general who found that nothing the FBI was doing was illegal? The FBI has done everything illegal since its founding. So we're living in an illusion. And I think it's time that we just woke up and realized we have an opportunity. By the way, because he held those hearings and embarrassed the CIA and hence embarrassed our intelligence state, they took him out of office. He lost because he put millions of dollars in his opponent's election the next time. So one honest legislator, one time he speaks and it's gone. And they count upon short memories. But that person looks presidential, so let's just trust them because how they look or how they sound is just insane.
One thing that's happened is this blowback. I mean, we have seen Elizabeth Warren for who she is. We've tied her to how much money she's gotten. We've seen Bernie Sanders and who he is, and we've tied him to how much money he's gotten. You know, once the American public sees that, it's hard to unsee it. So even if you want to put blinders on, I mean, people are talking about it. It's really taken a veil off. And I think in some ways that's, one of the reasons it was done this way is to kind of, remove this veil of secrecy and to actually allow us to see who these representatives are and that they are not there to represent us. They're there to represent their donors.
This has been the case for decades. I'll give you one final example of why I challenge Bernie Sanders. I appreciate some of his statements and some of his efforts. But when he said, well, I'm for universal health care, are you? Well, then why didn't you do some homework in order to show people we've been approaching it the wrong way? I've always supported taking all money out of elections, 100%. And then I showed how you do that and still have fair elections. Universal health care. I sent Bernie Sanders. I sent every member of Congress. I sent all the media, Rachel Maddow, how you approach universal health care. And that is, you first take away all of the corruption within that. But then you also stop doctors from overdiagnosing, which they do, and overtreating because they're afraid that they'll have a litigious patient who will sue them. So their malpractice insurance is high. So I say take away all malpractice insurance and have what we have in Florida and other states, no fault insurance. So you can't sue a doctor or a hospital that individually. What happens is that 1% of the doctor and the hospital's profits go into a general fund to pay people for their legitimate injuries. But then I show how that saves you $240 billion. And when I added up all the things you could save by, for example, making all medical schools and nursing schools free. But in return, the payback is you have to cap your salary for the first 5 years at a lower rate, let's say $200,000 a year, because you don't have that monster fee. And you also start getting a fee from the time you're an intern and resident, because otherwise they're overworked and they're treated terribly. Let me just finish my thought. So when you give them an opportunity to have a good quality background, but you've taken that excess profiteering out of it, and then you do the same thing with hospitals, and you have price control, you give them 300% profit. That's a big profit. So a drug that costs 10 cents at a 30-day supply of a generic drug, and I have all the major drugs, and some drugs the smaller drugs work on a 3,000% profit, and some a 50,000% profit. I've seen drugs on one of the top 10 drugs, a 30-day supply costs 10 cents, and they're selling for $200. So if you take that excessive profit, you give them a legitimate profit, now you've brought down hundreds of billions of dollars a year. When you put prevention into a program.
Yeah, I was just going to go into prevention.
So you put that in. So what my final figures were, and I detail every single figure, you save $2.7 trillion a year with universal health care done correctly. And that means that where they're saying, well, Bernie, this is going to cost us $2 trillion a year. So at the end of 10 years, we're $20 trillion in debt. And everybody says, well, can't afford that. No, if it's done correctly, then you'll be saving $2.7 trillion a year. You'll have less death. You'll have less injury. You'll have more proper treatment. Nobody will be excluded. And I sent that to every member of Congress. It was like a 28-page report. Then not a single person ever responded to me.
Well,
we've had answers, but people in power don't want those answers.
It's really, a breakthrough that you've explained to us as far as, what we have right now is a sick care system. And one of the things that Bobby Kennedy is promoting is preventative health care, which will change it to a healthcare system for real and not a sick care system as we have. Well, I'd like to thank you. It was amazing to hear you speak on this. And I listened to a lot of your shows, and it's always just an honor to have you here. So this wraps up our show for today. This is Left on Left. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov, and of course the amazing Dr. Gary Null. And please remember to like, donate, and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Thank you, Dr. Null.
My pleasure.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, now I got to go jump over and do my live show.
That was great.
It's
I learned
amazing.
a lot. Yeah, the stuff with the HIV/AIDS is very interesting. Sad.
Just to let you know, we're still live. I mean, if you got to go, you got to go. But we can still talk if you've got more to talk about. That's just we had to wrap it up with the radio.
He has another show.
You guys can keep going.
He's jumping from one to the other.
I've got about 2 minutes before I'm going over there, but I just want to mention that if people want more information on the articles, on the history of AIDS, I wrote a textbook on it. I have all those articles on GaryNull.com. I have my documentaries there as well. And by the way, I've produced, written, and directed 13 documentaries on the failings of our medical industrial complex and why you should always do more homework outside of their principles of what you should do before you take any drug or before you take any vaccine. I ultimately say it's your freedom of choice. I just hope you're informed enough to make the right choice. So I'm over on PRN. We have you're all there, congratulations. We have voices for those who are outliers, voices for those who don't want to be a part of consensus, but want to be a part of the truth. And that's what we seek, the truth to empower. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, that was really fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Great.
Do
I got
you want to play?
too, but
Well, do you want to just play a couple of the clips that you picked out, just so we could see, kind of up close and personal, these vitriol attacks?
if you want,
Maybe
maybe
two.
let's have another show on that. Let's do another show on that.
Okay, that
that will
sounds
be
good.
on the radio because we have some good material. So
Okay, sounds good. Well, that was amazing. Thank you, Jayme, and we lost Jayme. Oh, there he is.
I
Come on,
just got out. That was
Thank you,
absolutely
Jayme.
fascinating.
That was fascinating. Yeah, he really. I've seen a couple of his documentaries. I'm going to look up some more of them because his documentaries are really good.
Those are the kind. His voice is the kind of voice we needed to be hearing 2 to 3 years ago, when they were being suppressed. And
yeah, well, even now
he would have been yelled out of the room. Talking.
Yeah,
about
he's a very great guy, and he really does his research.
Yeah, they deplatformed him in WBAI. I mean, it just it is terrible that how they did stuff with with all these narratives.
And with the recent
anyway, I gotta run because I got other stuff to do. So
okay,
yeah, next week we have 2 more guests, right?
Right. Right.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, Gloria, you'll speak to Jayme before to get the
Sure.
links.
Yeah. We'll take care of all
We'll
that.
take care of it. Don't worry. We work
And
closely together.
that's good. And you're setting up stuff so we can, was it Substack or Podbeam or
Yeah,
what
I think
on that?
we're going to be setting up. I think we're going to be setting up a Substack.
Okay.
From people I've talked to, just to use it
That's
to
the way to
push
generate some
out.
revenue.
Well, we're going to use it to push out the show as a podcast. And the
Okay.
plan right now is to get up all the old episodes, because a lot of the things you've talked about over the last year are evergreen subjects. So if somebody finds the show and they like it, they can go back and listen to
Yeah,
all
and
of
some
it.
are historical topics like Pearl
Very
Harbor,
much so.
or so.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, great.
So
Well, we
that's
appreciate
the
that.
plan.
Yeah,
And also,
I'm promoting some on my Substack, but most of my subscribers are unpaid, but I do have I'm getting more and more unpaid subscribers.
Hey, everybody, send money.
yeah, well, right now I just want to try to build the audience. I think the information is so important to get out there and make people realize you can't trust this two-party system. They're not working for you. And you see it right now with the way the Democrats are now saying all the things they should have been saying for the last 2 to 3 years. Well, now they're all of a sudden they're saying it because Trump's in charge, but they wouldn't say it when Biden was in charge. So what kind of credibility do they have?
That's true.
Well,
I got to run, guys. So
all right.
Thanks for a great show. Take care.
Yeah, thanks
thanks,
everybody.
Jayme.
Thanks, Jayme. All right, I'm gonna head out and go visit Dad. All right.
Yeah, if you gotta, I mean, if you could stick around a bit, like, because there was so much interesting stuff he said there.
I think we have to do another show on this.
Yeah,
I mean, we have so much material that we put together.
and there's
But
so much
I mean, he's like a historian. It's amazing. It's just amazing to hear him.
Well, and there's so much recent news. I think you could even pile into it with like the information coming out about USAID. Like we all knew they were being used for infiltrating foreign countries, but now it's starting to look like, well, they were using USAID to infiltrate America.
Yeah, and also,
they were buying off all the media or paying.
There's also
for
a giant kickback scheme too, with money going to favored people. So it's pretty bad.
Yeah,
but I do have to head out.
I get it.
We can pick this up next week or the week after, because I think we have guests. I think we have guests for the next 2 weeks shows, and so actually I think we have 2 guests for next week's show, and then we have 2 guests for the following show. So it's going to be kind of busy, but we can circle back and discuss a lot of the stuff.
I know, and we didn't even get to Tulsi Gabbard today. It was all
I know,
but it was all juicy stuff. So I hope the people watching this really enjoyed it, and I hope
really hearing a master speak. I mean, he has such incredible knowledge of this material, and he is so connected to the research on these topics, that it's just, really amazing.
Yeah, and I hope I can fit all of it into the hour block for the radio, because we did go over a bit.
Yeah, you cut a little here and there. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, you're right. I didn't want to cut him off, but
I know it's a master speaking. It's a master speaking.
I've got to get the exact details on how to edit that. So, because now that we're doing an hour, it's slightly different.
I think an hour feels good, though. I mean, the 2.5 hours is just too short. I mean,
the question I have, is it an hour or is it 50 minutes? Because
we're waiting for because they had to get back to us and let us know. So hopefully, we'll hear from her. And next week is a board meeting. So
well, I to edit for the show to get it up next week, I need to hear from her like in the next day or two.
All right, I'll push. We need that information.
So I think we should also maybe do some bumpers that I can use. Like you can say, and that's going to be it for today, but you can listen to the full interview on the podcast or on the
I'll prepare some things.
So I can put those little like 15-second little bumpers in the edits. So if I can't fit something, I can put that there and direct them to YouTube, the Rumble, the podcast, and so we'll have to record that. I think why not record it live when we got time?
Yeah.
And we'll have
I'll
to write
prepare some statements. You just have to tell me what media we're going to be.
Right.
I'm going to be focusing on, and then I'll prepare.
We'll work that out. And I
Statement.
think we might even need to do one for like a commercial break too, and then like an out to the commercial and come back in. So we'll figure that out. We gotta get the details on what it is, because an hour is different from two 25 minutes. So all right. Well,
All right.
let's
Well,
go ahead
thank
and
you.
wrap up the show. That was good. Absolutely fascinating. I gotta talk to Pasta, because he's executive producer now on the show, and see, should we leave this up on YouTube or not? Because this is the kind of thing that would have been taken down instantly during the lockdown.
You let Pasta decide what he wants to do.
So if you're watching this on YouTube,
I don't know how long it's going to be up.
miracle, but it might not still be up there. But you will be watching.
But we
this
do
on
have the
Rumble.
disclaimer. I did get the disclaimer in the front.
I know. Oh yeah, we have a disclaimer that we used to use too.
Did it work? Yeah.
I should flash it up on the screen, actually.
Yeah. Well, I did this. I did do the disclaimer.
Here it is. Everything the CDC tells you to take is always safe and effective. Trust the CDC; they're never ever wrong.
The CDC is never ever wrong.
Ever wrong. You always get it right. You could trust the CDC. There you go. All right, let's get out of here. You got to go.
Yeah.
I got to wrap things up. And everybody watching at home, thank you so much for watching us do these recordings. We'll be back next week. Like Gloria said, we have 2 guests, and I think we're going to be doing more guests on the show moving forward.
Yeah.
But we'll still have
format works well with that.
Yeah, and I think we'll still have Jeremy talking about some subjects as well, because he's got a wealth of information.
Yeah, we're going
and
to
also Costa says he wants to come back on the show.
All right.
Too. So it'll be fun.
Good.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.